However, not everyone remembers or wants to remember many of the key points he just made. For example, he said, quote, "Passing and implementing this law was not easy," close quote, which could win an award for extreme understatement. And he was certainly right when he said that he and his administration were, quote, "met every step of the way by entrenched and well-funded opposition who tried to block any reform at all," close quote. After all, that's why it took 18 arduous months to get the Dodd-Frank Act passed. For the same reasons, that's also why it required the next 6 years of the Obama administration, from 2010 through 2016, to make sure that the law became a reality and protected America's families, taxpayers, consumers, investors, and Main Street businesses. It's difficult today to remember much, if not most, of those struggles. And there are lots of reasons for that. First, needless to say, there's a lot going on today, some of which I'll discuss in a moment. Second, the Great Recession was a searing experience for tens of millions of American families who lost their jobs, savings, homes, and so much more. No one wants to remember those awful events. Third, the financial crash was 12 years ago, and the Dodd-Frank Act was 10 years ago. Many people simply have no actual memory of either event. But there's another very big reason for people not remembering. A fortune has been spent on advertising, lobbying, and campaign contributions to erase the memory and rewrite the history of what happened before the 2008 crash, who was responsible for it, the trillions in bailouts, the damage it caused, and why the Dodd-Frank financial reform law was and remains so important to the American people. That's why today Better Markets is releasing 2 reports. Think of them as memory aids and a historical counter-narrative to those who would try to substitute self-serving spin for facts. The first report is President Obama, in his own words, making financial reform a reality 2009 to 2016. And the second report is 10 years of Dodd-Frank and financial reform, Obama's successes, Trump's rollbacks, and future challenges. I'll provide a brief overview of those reports in a minute, but first I want to address some of the historic events going on in our country today. As the country faces social upheaval and political unrest as a result of racial inequalities that have gone on for far too long, as well as the economic turmoil from the pandemic, one might ask, is it really important to discuss and reflect on the Dodd-Frank Act, a 10-year-old law? I would say yes, because the Dodd-Frank Act and financial stability, financial reform, and financial rules more broadly can be the means to achieve some of the most important social, political, and economic goals facing the country. Those goals include a strong and stable financial system that reduces inequality and creates economic security, opportunity, and widespread prosperity for all people, supports the productive economy, produces sustained, durable, and broad-based economic growth, and protects investors, consumers, workers, and the environment. Those goals, however, are often undermined by an economic system that does not work for the vast majority of Americans because, among other things, the financial system is too often a wealth extraction mechanism for the few rather than a wealth creation system for the many. This is the result of too many, and certainly not all, but too many in the financial sector using their economic power to buy political power, which they then use throughout the policymaking process to protect and increase their economic power, usually at the expense of everyone else, including their competitors and others in the financial sector itself. Making all of that worse, the pandemic and the economic crisis it has caused have exposed the structural inequalities embedded in our economic and financial systems and how they egregiously and disproportionately impact Black Americans and people of color. The financial system and the financial industry have played a significant role in creating and perpetuating those racial inequalities. If Black lives matter, and they do, then we need economic and financial systems that truly work for everyone and lift everyone up. It's critical to remember that the economy, who it works for and who it does not, is not predetermined. It is shaped by people, and it is often rigged by those seeking to protect their own interest. Their actions to maximize their profits, protect and increase their wealth, and maintain their positions of privilege, power, and influence profoundly impact who gets the benefits of our economic and financial systems and who does not. The Dodd-Frank Act could not have addressed and did not address all of those issues, but it was intended to create and support guardrails, gatekeepers, and guard dogs that could force the financial sector to better serve society. That means supporting the real productive economy that generates jobs and broad-based economic growth, rather than enriching the few, destabilizing the financial system, draining public resources for bailouts, and ripping off consumers and investors. That's why what's at stake in the Dodd-Frank law and in financial stability, financial reform, and properly implemented rules more broadly is nothing less than enabling more Americans to attain the American dream and improve their standard of living, quality of life, and peace of mind. That's why the Dodd-Frank Act and financial reform is relevant and important today. That's what President Obama and his team fought for 8 years to achieve, which comes through loud and clear if you go back and read what the president said during that time. It's all in the report that we're producing today, President Obama in his own words. In it, you'll see that just a month after being sworn in, the president laid out his 7 core goals for financial reform, which he then relentlessly pursued. He correctly diagnosed the problem early on. Quote, excess greed, excess compensation, excess risk-taking have made us all vulnerable and left us holding the bag. The business models that created a lot of paper wealth, but not real wealth in this country and have now resulted in a crisis can't be the model for future growth going forward. That's why he said, quote, our goal is to restore markets in which we reward hard work and responsibility and innovation, not recklessness and greed, close quote. He was very clear when he said, quote, we believe in people getting rich based on performance and what they add to the value and products and services that they create, which required building a new foundation for sustained economic growth. Importantly, he also knew that, quote, putting smart regulations in place, oversight, transparency, and accountability, those things are not anti-market. They're pro-market, close quote. And while those rules were unquestionably pro-market, they nonetheless threatened the narrow special interest of Wall Street's biggest firms' ways of doing business, which were incredibly lucrative for them, even as they were dangerous and costly for everyone else in America. To protect their profits and bonuses, those firms decided to ferociously fight financial reform. The opposition was so intense that the president declared in January of 2010 that, quote, if those folks want to fight, it's a fight I'm ready to have, close quote. And they fought and fought until the Dodd-Frank Act was signed into law 10 years ago today. All that fighting has made it easy for those seeking to discredit financial reform to mischaracterize the Dodd-Frank Act as a partisan bill. However, that's simply not true. Yes, it was largely a partisan vote, but it was a bipartisan bill in many of its key substantive provisions. We detail those facts in the second report that Better Markets is releasing today, 10 Years of Dodd-Frank and Financial Reform. That report begins with a history of what led up to the crash, including dangerous deregulation and financialization, and then discusses the major provisions of the law itself, including extensive involvement of congressional Republicans. The report reviews what happened under President Obama and then President Trump, concluding with a look at what comes next for financial reform, including beyond Dodd-Frank. Of course, the financial reform law, like most laws, was not self-executing. Like the financial industry and the financial system, the law was big, complex, and long. It required numerous financial regulatory agencies to consider, propose, finalize, implement, interpret, and ultimately enforce hundreds of rules. Getting that substantially done took the last 6 years of President Obama's administration. The report details that by the end of President Obama's first term, the most dangerous and unreasonable risks in the financial system had been significantly reduced, making a financial crash much less likely due to rules which, in summary, I'm sure you would like me to go over every word of this. I'm not going to. It's all in the report. But the rules lowered capital and liquidity at the banks, increased capital and liquidity, regulated derivatives, required living wills and liquidation authority. President Obama administration also required living wills, liquidation authority, and many other important provisions, including enhancing supervision and regulation of systemically important banks and non-banks. The law also pushed the financial sector more in the direction of serving its socially useful purpose, justifying its social costs, and earning its taxpayer backing, by refocusing the largest, most dangerous banks back to traditional banking activities and away from trading and socially useless activities. The point was to get banks back into banking from Main Street. The report also details the deregulatory actions of the Trump administration, which they've begun or completed, urged on by Wall Street's biggest banks and too many in the financial industry more broadly. This also is detailed in the report. I also won't go through this slide. But what's happened in the last 3 years is lowering capital and liquidity, allowing more proprietary trading, rolling back consumer and investor protections, among other things, all of which are detailed in the report, which we hope you will read. Now, the bottom line is, in closing, the report makes clear, as to the events over the last several decades, that it simply cannot reasonably be disputed that strong, robust, and effective markets, free markets, require equally strong, robust, and effective rules that require transparency, oversight, and accountability, establish a level playing field, enable competition, enforce a baseline of fair dealing, police market participants, engender investor and consumer confidence, reduce income and wealth inequality, and ultimately lead to a balanced financial system that fuels the productive economy and improves the standard of living of all Americans. That's why President Obama's work and the Dodd-Frank Act are so incredibly important and relevant today. And that's why we're releasing these two reports, which are available on our website, www.bettermarkets.com, as well as at the microsite for this event. We hope you will read them.